This is a teeny tiny island with a singular tree in the middle of an infinite ocean, and I'm stranded here for the next 100 days, with no food, basically no resources, and no friends. This guy doesn't count, he's not my friend. I'm not only going to attempt to survive here, but also transform this barren, minuscule mound of dirt into an epic tropical civilization paradise sprawling with inhabitants. That's right, I'm going to get villagers. I'm also going to attempt to collect every block and item added in the new 1.21 update, get full enchanted diamond gear, and even get other wood types. Seems pretty easy, right? No! I couldn't even find anyone who's ever done this before. This was literally the hardest challenge I've ever done. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and go get your snacks. Because this is how I survived 100 days on a deserted island in Minecraft Hardcore. On day 1, I was summoned into an infinite abyss of ocean with nothing but the non-existent clothes on my back.
Got a disgusting creature here.
As always, because I'm an Aquarius, and I'm not like other axolotls, I decided to start with the extremely unique decision of chopping down my first tree, making a table crafting, and constructing my first device. I'm starting on this island a level 0 crook with absolutely no friends. Absolutely no friends. But I dare to dream. One day, I'll be a level 100 mafia boss, I'll reach Town Hall 37, and maybe I'll even have 20 million power in Rise of Kings. After defiling my first act of nature, I managed to profit a couple saplings. Eggs are still $10 a gallon though, so I began my next money-making hack I learned on TikTok. A stable 9-to-5 job. I mean, farming. They don't want you to know this one.
No one likes you.
I have ambitious goals for these 100 days, but for now, I'm just a humble seafaring lad who's sometimes a genocidal maniac. I'm just quirky like that.
Whoa, that looks cool. Oh my gosh, it's so deep. Oh my god, I'm already dying. I forgot I'm in hardcore.
Anyways, I continued exterminating the native sea life population with my bare hands until I grew a conscience.
Oh my god, there's already drowned. I don't have tridents, do they? I don't even have a sword. What am I supposed to do? Okay, I'm retreating. Hopefully they don't come on my island.
Our first priority is to expand our island enterprise and franchise our tree farm business to stimulate the deserted island economy. And I want to do this within the first few days of this challenge, so we need to get to work. You see, not only are we going to need a lot of dirt for building the island and lots of wood for trading with villagers later on, we need a large dirt platform for wandering traders, and ideally passive mobs to spawn, so we can get different sapling types and foliage, wool for beds, leather for enchanting, and maybe even sugarcane if we're lucky. So after beginning the next generation in the line of Ben the Boss Oak Tree Products Incorporated, I flattened the island by mining slower than my dad when he went to the store to get milk, before upgrading to a proper excavator. I then began on my first real estate endeavor and constructed our first property. I mean, it may be a bit dirty, but it'll do the trick. Laugh now, I command it.
Please get out. Thank you. Know your place.
Yeah, unfortunately, it'll probably only sell for like 2.1 million, but they can all be winners. I then added a front door to our property.
You'll be fine out there. Don't worry. Don't worry. Nothing bad is gonna happen.
And then began excavating a tunnel into the Earth's crust. The plan. Oh, sorry, I forgot to provide a proper warning. It's now time for the plan. Step 1, begin agricultural enterprise. Status complete. Step 2, become a homeowner. Status impossible. Step 3, obtain iron armor and tools. In progress. I didn't get any iron, but I did obtain fossil fuels so I can increase my carbon footprint. I don't know what carbon footprint is, but it sounds cool, so I want more of it. After spreading the light of Jeebus across our island and cooking up a midnight snack, we had officially survived one day on a deserted island in Minecraft Hardcore, so I'll make sure to put that on our resume.
Isn't that right, you disgusting beast? No one likes you. You have no friends.
I then dove into the depths to depopulate the local oceanic population and the local underwater vegetation on the morning of day 2. After acquiring sustenance, it was time for step 4, expand the island. I began by constructing, or I guess destructing, a basement for our dirt mansion to collect an amassment of dirt, and then began placing it in around the island. Then I found lapis? Yeah, I was a bit confused by this, but apparently lapis can spawn as high as Y64, which is crazy, but anyways, I continued the expansion of our landmass and tree farm enterprise for the rest of the day, and then epically upgraded our tool set on the morning of day 3. Unfortunately, our island is still smaller than Eckhart Tolle's ego, but we need it to be larger than One Piece's episode count. So I returned to placing cubic meters of dirt with my bare hands, faster than AI is gonna take my job. Once I ran out of dirt, I absolutely skedaddled into the mines and began destructing the most convoluted tunnel you'll ever see, and then found this cool water cave that led into the ocean. Awesome. I then went back to hacking at stone until I found this patch of dirt, of which I began extracting. I then resurfaced and went back to constructing a literal island, again with my bare hands. Although I'm not 100% sure that I have hands, because I am an axolotl. Once my construction materials were depleted, I headed back into the mines to obtain more. I then finally found iron on the morning of day 4. I scurried back up to the surface and smelted up my newfound profits to create a brand new pickaxe, a bucket, and a shield. Then I chopped down a tree and used the rest of the iron to make an iron shirt and an iron stick. I then headed back into the mines and continued losing brain cells faster than an iPad kid playing Clash of Clans while scrolling through TikTok simultaneously, until I decided to head down to Deep Slate level, which is when I basically immediately ran into a mine shaft. I decided to conquer my cowardly nature and jumped into action, and I pretty quickly found our first vein of shiny blue rocks, which I promptly defended and then collected. I then went around breaking a bunch of cobwebs for string, which we can use to craft wool for a bed. After a bit more exploring and profit collection, however, my block game induced anxiety meter was higher than your screen time, so I absolutely traversed my way back up to the surface faster than the speed of light. I then got a job as a lumberjack for a short while before constructing our first diamond pickaxe and using the string we got to craft our first bed. I then decided to sleep. So it's now day 5 and it's time to fully complete step 4. So I crafted some more iron armor and tools and headed back into the mine, and I pretty quickly hit a gravel patch, which I promptly destructed. You see, gravel can be used to craft coarse dirt, and coarse dirt can be turned back into dirt with a hoe, which effectively turns 2 dirt into 4. And you can continue this process as much as you want as long as you have enough gravel. So after fully demolishing both a gravel and a dirt patch, I headed back up to the surface and crafted a bunch of coarse dirt, and got to work placing it into the island and converting it into dirt. And since we're gonna need a lot of dirt to build the whole island later on, and funnily enough, gravel is more available to us than dirt via the bottom of the ocean, we're gonna be using this method a lot. I did that until I ran out of coarse dirt and then expanded our tree farm some more. I then used the iron we got from our underground business venture to complete our full set of iron armor and tools, completing step 3. So it's now time for step 5, but I'll explain more about that in 73.8 seconds. For now, I just continued expanding our tree farm enterprise a bit for the rest of the day, and then almost destroyed our dirt hut on the morning of day 6. But I realized I was a despicable human being for even thinking of committing such an atrocious act. So I rebuilt it and then headed back into the mines. You see, we not only need to get dirt to expand the island as quickly as possible for wandering traders and wood, but we also need to get enough blocks to build a mob farm as quickly as possible, because a mob farm is actually our ticket to getting villagers, because of zombie villagers. I'll explain more later, but for now, after destroying this dirt and gravel patch that was larger than my ego, I resurfaced again, crafted up some more coarse dirt, and continued constructing the island. I then began chopping down trees, clearing leaves, and replanting saplings to further franchise our tree farm corporation. Trees kept growing, so I continued that process until basically the whole island was covered in saplings. And then I headed back into the mine to collect the rest of the dirt and gravel patch I left behind earlier. Then on the morning of day 7, I went back to placing dirt into the island, and with that, we're basically done with step 4, and can fully move on to step 5 of our epic plan, the mob farm. So I ate a ribeye medium rare, and then created a chest to store our mob farm resources. We're gonna need like over 20 stacks of blocks and a bunch of other stuff, so we have a bit to go, but nonetheless, I crafted some of the other materials we're going to need and put them into this chest. I then headed back into the mines and continued mining for the rest of the day, and for the morning of day 8. But that process was becoming more boring than my life story, so I returned to the surface, expanded our wheat farm, added our new profits to the mob farm materials chest, and then realized there wasn't much else to do with my life, so I headed back into the mines and completely obliterated the Earth's crust for 8 billion years. Yep, that's 100% factual. As I returned to the surface, I had the misfortune of remembering what phantoms were, and like always, these things are gonna be really annoying throughout this challenge. I have no enemies, except phantoms, those things suck. I continued expanding the island by creating another outline a few blocks out and beginning to fill it in. I couldn't afford my mortgage payments anymore, so I held back my tears as I heartlessly and ruthlessly demolished our dirt hut. But I moved through the grieving process rather swiftly with a mere 40 years of therapy, and began chopping down trees on our island on the morning of day 9, cause they were annoying me. I then made our storage system look a bit less awful, and then realized I could go ahead and check off some of the 1.21 blocks and items we need to collect. So I placed in some more dirt in this part of the island, and then crafted and placed it down a crafter. I then crafted a crafter using said crafter to get a new 1.21 advancement. Crafters crafting crafters. Pretty crafty if I do say so myself. I'm sorry. Our efforts then finally paid off because a wandering trader had already spawned. He was invisible, but he had a jungle sapling trade, which is the main trade I want other than sugarcane, because I want our base to be jungle themed. So I trapped him in a boat, and then his llamas disappeared. I wonder where they went in such a hurry. Oh, cut. I don't have any way to get emeralds yet, but hopefully this boat prevents the wandering trader from despawning until we get emeralds so we can get that jungle sapling trade. And just to make sure bro survives until then, I built a cobblestone shelter around him. I then expanded our wheat farm more, and now it's day 10, and we're officially 10% of the way through this challenge. And we're making a decent bit of progress so far, but there's still a lot left to do, so on the morning of day 10, I crafted and placed down the copper grates, doors, and trapdoors. I then decided that disgusting creature had a bit too much freedom, so I chained him to this fence post and left him there forever. Once you obtain one one singular brain cell, I will release you. So basically, I won't release you. I also attached a boat to a fence post with the other lead I got from the llamas, so yeah. It's pretty cool that you can do that now in 1.21. That feature is going to make transporting villagers once we get them later on a lot easier. Speaking of getting villagers though, we still need to get blocks to build the mob farm, so we can actually do that. So I headed back into the mines for another overworked underpaid shift, and I hacked at stone, dirt, and gravel for basically the rest of the day before resurfacing by the end of the day. I then crafted a stone cutter and then crafted some chiseled copper using said stone cutter and placed it into our 1.21 blocks display on the morning of day 11. We almost had enough blocks to build the mob farm, so after placing a bunch more dirt into the island, I headed back into the mines and continued excavating profits from the earth for the rest of the day. Then wasted time extending the mine through this water cave for some reason on the morning of day 12. I continued that process until my brain imploded and then headed back up to the surface. I then committed my daily dose of deforestation for mob farm resources, but mostly to smelt into charcoal for fuel. I then discovered that you can plant saplings on farms. I have no actual idea why I never knew you could do this, but this is absolutely fascinating. I was still lacking funding for my business venture, however, and investors were showing little to no interest. So I took matters into my own hands and headed back into the mines again and proceeded to obliterate stone for basically the rest of the day. And on the morning of day 13, I crafted up the remainder of the materials required to build the mob farm, and then it was finally time to actually build it. I began by bridging out a bit from the island because this farm is going to be mildly atrocious looking. I then began building up with cobblestone until I hit the stratosphere, performed an Olympic dive and broke all the bones in my body, and then constructed a vertical transportation device all the way up the tower. And even though this farm is going to be monumental to making a ton of progress towards our goals in this challenge, I'm sure you've seen this exact farm built literally 1 billion times before, so I'll try to speed through this a bit. I built out a platform at the top of the tower and then began work on the ankle breaking chute before being interrupted by more phantoms. After surviving by cowering in fear, I went to sleep and then watched as the sun burnt my enemies to a crisp on the morning of day 14. I then headed back to work and completed the folly down chute thing. I then added in the tax collection system, built out the water slides, and then built the platforms. And then realized I made the farm slightly too big and the water didn't reach the end of the water slides. I wasn't really in the mood to undo and then redo everything I just built though, so I just moved the water sources forward and added these wall things along with adding in all the trapdoors so the mobs actually walk into the water channels. I completed that by the end of the day and began adding in the roof on the morning of day 15. And I ran out of cobblestone, so I started just using whatever blocks I could find in my pockets to complete the roof. It doesn't really matter though, we're not gonna see this a lot, so we just need it to be functional. But I ran out of blocks, so I headed back down to the base. But I got distracted harvesting our wheat field and expanding it even more. Wheat is going to be really important though, not only for food, but also for trading with villagers, and most importantly, so we can actually build a villager breeder and get a villager trading hall and populate our island with 100 inhabitants. I then realized that our wandering trader had escaped and his llamas had returned. But actually, the wandering trader just despawned, because apparently boats don't prevent them from despawning after a certain amount of time. And then somehow another wandering trader spawned soon after that. This would be lucky, but we don't have any emeralds yet, so this is really unlucky if anything. But nonetheless, the llamas mysteriously disappeared and I decided to borrow their leads. And I trapped the wandering trader in a boat in this cobblestone prison just in case we're able to get emeralds in the next few days somehow. Also, his trades weren't that great either. Anyways, I went back to replanting the wheat field and then grabbed some more blocks and headed back up to work on the mob farm. But when I got back up on the morning of day 16, I could hear that mobs were already spawning, even though I'm pretty sure I lit up the platform with torches. So I built up and around to gain the high ground and attack from above. But then I got scared by this creeper and ran away. Once I made my way back up, however, there were no mobs to be found. I'm pretty sure they just despawned and then didn't respawn because it's daytime. I took the W and got back to work on the roof. I also lit up the roof a bit more, and with that, the mob farm is finally complete and we're done with step 5. So I broke out all my scaffolding and the mob farm had already started working. And now it's time for step 6. Cure a zombie villager. Well, actually 2 zombie villagers. First, we need to trap 2 zombie villagers from this mob farm. To cure zombie villagers, you need a potion of weakness and a golden apple. We can make golden apples pretty easily, but a weakness potion would require a brewing stand and blaze powder, which would require going to the nether and finding a nether fortress. But that's time consuming and dangerous, assuming you have a skill issue like myself. But luckily, witches actually have a chance to throw weakness potions under certain conditions. We can worry about those conditions later, but for now, we just need to trap a witch along with our 2 zombie villagers. Both of those things are just gonna take a bit of patience and hard work. My 2 least favorite things. For now though, I wanted to take a break from the mob farm for a bit and work on another one of our goals. So I headed into the mines and began mining down deeper into deep slate level so we can find some tuff and get some of the new tuff blocks. I did that for the rest of the day and on the morning of day 17. Once I hit diamond level though, I just gave up. I guess. I went back up to the mob farm for some reason, and then went back down to the base and crafted a golden apple with some of the gold we got from mining. I then went back up to the mob farm to begin waiting for a zombie villager or witch to spawn. I waited, expanded the platform some, and then a witch fell down. Epic. So I blocked off the chute temporarily and built a prison for the witch. I'm pretty sure witches are just much more common than zombie villagers though, so this is still gonna take a bit of time unfortunately. I placed a boat in the witch's prison, broke out some blocks between the mob farm and the enclosure, and then used some water to get the witch into the boat. I then closed the mob farm back up and let all of the mobs out of the waiting room. I then headed back downstairs on the morning of day 18 and gathered up all the blocks I had. I then headed back up to the mob farm and continued expanding out the platform to make room for our next 2 prisoners. Patience. I then continued waiting for a zombie villager to fall down for a while, but without any luck, so I headed back down to the base and harvested and expanded our wheat field. I then headed back up to the mob farm, built the house for our patients. Yeah, that makes sense. I continued waiting for the rest of the day and managed to get more witches and suffer permanent hearing loss, but I obtained absolutely 0 zombie villagers. I continued my fruitless efforts on day 19, along with expanding the platform a bit more. I kept waiting for a while and managed to make some beds with the string I was getting from spiders, which were going to need for the villager breeder, but still no zombie villagers, so I decided to head back into the depths to get some more dirt, mostly because I was bored of just waiting at the mob farm, but also because we still need to expand the island more, because I'm pretty sure the other wandering trader already despawned, and we still need to get other wood types, and ideally sugarcane for enchanting as well. I then used my dirt profits to construct some more of the island, and then headed back into the depths with a different goal in mind. I began the search for tuff at deep slate level on the morning of day 20, but found gravel instead, so I headed up to the mine shaft we found earlier instead to gather up some tuff there so we can check some of the new tuff blocks off our list of 1.21 blocks and items. I then headed back up to the surface and crafted up a bunch of new blocks. I then placed them into our 1.21 blocks and items display. And now for most of the rest of what we have to get, we're going to have to find a trial chamber. And luckily, you can get trial chambers explorer maps from cartography villagers, which is not only one of the new items itself, but will also allow us to get the rest of the blocks and items. I then began duplicating our dirt using the coarse dirt method and placing it into the island for the rest of the day. Then I went to sleep for some reason. I guess I was tired. I headed back up to the mob farm on the morning of day 21 with a newfound sense of determination to wait until either the sun blows up or a zombie villager falls down this chute thing and blocks me. And after waiting for the entire rest of the day and for the morning of day 22, a zombie villager finally fell down. I quickly blocked off the chute and carefully deleted the other mobs. I then added a boat into our subject's prison, broke out some blocks, and then he just walked right into the boat. Now that we have our first subject, it's time to cure this fool. So I headed back down to the base and harvested and replanted our wheat field. Yeah, I guess I got distracted. Anyways, then I grabbed some building blocks and headed back up to the mob farm to build out a platform so we have some more room to perform the procedure. I then began trying to figure out how to get the witch and zombie villager into position on the morning of day 23. I basically need the witch to be right here and the zombie villager to be up on this platform. So I began constructing a hallway for the witch to walk down and a stairway for the zombie villager to walk up. I then realized that another zombie villager had fell down the mob farm chute, so I could actually cure both of them at the same time. So I blocked off the chute again and began carefully getting rid of all the other mobs. And there actually turned out to be 2 zombie villagers, so I guess we'll have a backup too. I then repeated basically the same process as before, but then the baby zombie villager escaped. I quickly used my multiple brain cells to tower up and then trapped him in a boat in a box. I then got the other zombie villager in a boat and then reconstructed the mob farm. I then realized that I only have 1 golden apple, but I need 2 if I'm going to cure both zombie villagers. So I headed back down to the base and headed back into the mines on the morning of day 24 to search for gold. After a bit of hacking at stone, I found this water cave with some gold in it. So I used the door method to swim around the water cave collecting gold, and I managed to get enough for another golden apple, so I headed back upstairs and chopped down some trees while I waited for our profits to smelt up. I then crafted the golden apple and headed back up to the mob farm. I then completed the trap for the zombie villagers and released them, and they almost immediately got into place. I don't think it's possible to get them into a singular block this way, but this should still be fine. And this trap door here will allow us to place blocks to trap the witch in here. So after expanding the platform a bit more on the morning of day 25, we were officially a quarter of the way through the challenge, and it's now time to get the witch into place. So I broke out the blocks leading to the prison and then broke the boat. I then used a water bucket to force the witch into position and then fully blocked off the exit. And now everything is finally in position and we can save these villagers' lives.
save their lives.
Anyways, the witch began throwing potions, and I began right-clicking the zombie villagers with golden apples. But the poison potions were getting my health pretty low, and instant damage potions do like 4 hearts of damage. So if I get hit with one when I'm below 4 hearts, I'll just instantly perish. Luckily though, it didn't take too long for the witch to throw a weakness potion, allowing me to begin the curing process for both zombie villagers. I then immediately gave the witch some constructive criticism on its existence, and then realized that the time the zombie villagers take to cure is randomized within a certain range. So we need to separate these two, or else one might just turn the other back into a zombie villager once they cure. And we only have a few minutes too, so I quickly began attempting to separate them, and managed to succeed just in time for the first one to finish curing. Say hello to the island's first inhabitant, Subterranean Reverberation, and the island's second inhabitant, John. I began destroying the mess surrounding Subterranean Reverberation and John's enclosure, and then began expanding their enclosure a bit. Then a thunderstorm started. Literally the day we get villagers via a witch, a thunderstorm starts which threatens to turn them back into a witch. I think the game doesn't like me. Anyways, on the morning of day 26, I completed construction of a temporary villager breeder using the beds we've gotten so far. I just want to quickly get some more villagers in case we tragically lose John or Subterranean Reverberation somehow. After I provided them 32 loaves of bread, they immediately started getting busy. And with that, we now have 3 inhabitants. So I gave them some more bread and continued destroying all these enclosures, and also got rid of the baby zombie villager. And now we have 4 inhabitants. So it's time to construct a proper villager breeder down on our island so we can get a villager trading hall and populate the island with 100 inhabitants. So I got the 2 baby villagers in a boat, went down to grab the lead we got from the wandering traders earlier, and then transported the boat off of the mob farm platform and down to the ocean below, using the epic new 1.21 feature that lets you attach leads to boats. I then attached the boat to a fence temporarily, broke down our old wandering trader prison, then went back up to the mob farm to destroy this thing, and then put Subterranean Reverberation and John, who are now our backup villagers, in a boat. This was just to make absolutely sure they don't despawn, but villagers shouldn't despawn even if they aren't in a boat. I began day 27 by duplicating some dirt and filling in the island a bit more to make room for the villager breeder. I then headed back up to the mob farm to grab some resources, and then finally started on the actual farm. I began by tilling the land and planting wheat for the villagers' food source. I then placed in some glass walls so they'll think they can escape, but they'll never be able to. I then began constructing the profit collection channel, and then realized that the villagers were already trying to produce product. I like the enthusiasm, I guess. Anyways, I placed all our beds down here so the villagers will constantly think that there are empty beds, which will make them produce product. I then brought our prisoners into their new home, but they immediately escaped to go to sleep. Amazing escape plan. Normally, this farm is built on solid ground, so I had to go underwater to build the channel that the baby villagers will fall into. But anyways, I completed the villager breeder on the morning of day 28, but I was unfortunately too broke to build the whole thing out of glass, so it looks kind of ugly. But it doesn't really matter because we're not really ever going to see this later on when we build the actual island. I then harvested and replanted our wheat, and then gave the villagers an absurd quantity of bread to get the farm started. And the farm seemed to be working, so I decided to go get our 2 backup villagers from the mob farm so we can get started on the trading hall. I transported them to the island the same way I did before, and then finally began work on building the villager trading hall. And I had gotten potatoes and carrots from the mob farm, so I bone milled them to obtain 2 more renewable food sources. Then on the morning of day 29, I saw that the villager production factory was in fact producing, so I went back to work on the trading hall and began by building out a cobblestone platform. I then needed a bunch of wood for the office cubicles, so I chopped down some trees and then began placing in some markers to figure out the spacing of each villager containment cell. I then built up some of them, then mined out some cobblestone under our base for some reason, and then began constructing an indefinite workspace for a fletching villager and an armorer. I then transported our 2 unpaid interns, over to the new office building and into their new offices, where they will remain for the rest of their natural lifespans. Then on the morning of day 30, this squid unfortunately passed away, although I have no idea how. Wait, cut. But for some reason, our unemployed population didn't want to work. This generation has no work ethic, I tell you. But my love is conditional, so I forced them to take the jobs. And the reason I wanted a fletching villager is because we can trade sticks for emeralds. And that's one of the easiest resources to collect with our tree farm and the mob farm providing an infinite source of bone meal. And we're going to use said emeralds not only to trade with wandering traders once another one spawns, but mainly to get enchanted diamond armor. So I began chopping down trees, turning said trees into sticks, and turning said sticks into emeralds to level level up our armorer villager. And even though we haven't fully completed step 7, it's time for step 8, obtain immense material wealth. Basically, we need to get full enchanted diamond armor and tools, enchanted books, and a Trial Chambers Explorer map from the villager trading hall, because accomplishing our goals would be basically impossible without these things. I then went back to a simple life as a humble lumberjack, crafted more sticks, and then headed back into the city to get rich quick, day trading for emeralds and for worthless pieces of armor to level up our armorer villager. I then realized that I could use another fletching villager to trade with while this fletcher restocks his trades, and I should also probably level up a toolsmith to get enchanted diamond tools. So I headed over to our villager farm to collect the profits and shipped a couple more unpaid interns overseas. Then I was getting annoyed by phantoms again, so I went to sleep. And then on the morning of day 31, I showed our newest employees into their offices, but one of the employees was trying to escape. Bro thinks he's gonna see his family again. Anyways, once I threatened to dock his pay, he immediately ran into his office. Wait till I tell him there is no pay. I then continued trading and managed to get our armorer's first diamond armor trades, and for literally 1 emerald each, which I assume is because he's a cured zombie villager. Then after purchasing the entire stock of diamond armor, the remaining pieces of armor unlocked. And just like that, we have full enchanted diamond armor. And now that we have that done, we need to get a full set of enchanted diamond tools, which is going to require trading with our toolsmith villager a lot more to level him up. So I continued chopping down trees, trading sticks for emeralds, and then using said emeralds to level up our toolsmith villager. And then I went back to the villager breeder to get more villagers so I can make more money so I can buy nicer stuff, because a materialistic lifestyle is what truly brings me inner peace. Anyways, I went back to chopping down trees for the rest of the day and for the morning of day 32. But basically, I want to make one of these villagers a cartography villager and the other one a librarian. But I just realized that you need paper to craft a cartography table and paper to craft books to craft a bookshelf for a lectern, which we need sugarcane and leather for. We got leather from wandering trader llamas, but we do not have sugarcane. But you can actually get paper from shipwrecks, and there should be plenty of those in this world. So that's the plan eventually, but for now, after conducting some more business transactions, I went back to chopping down trees and trading with villagers, and I was able to get a diamond hoe trade from our toolsmith, which will actually be pretty useful later on. Anyways, I chopped down a bunch more trees and then another wandering trader spawned, but his trades were absolute garbage. I bought the sea pickles cause I'll definitely use those eventually. I then continued trading on the morning of day 33 and finally leveled our toolsmith up fully, but his trades were kinda garbage. I mean, bro wants a diamond for a singular emerald in return. This guy should be in prison or something. Oh wait. Anyways, I need another toolsmith, so I began smelting all the iron I got from the armorer down because I needed a singular additional iron ingot to make another smithing table. Then this wandering trader llama mysteriously disappeared again. I then crafted the smithing table and placed it in. And I guess I'll just get the cartographer and librarian villagers later. For now, I got the villagers into their offices and then went back to chopping down trees. I did that for basically the rest of the day and then continued doing that on the morning of day 34. And both villagers had accepted their fate and locked onto the workstations. I then purchased an enchanted diamond shovel, chopped down more trees, traded more, and managed to fully level up one of our toolsmiths. I then dove into the ocean because it's now time for step 9, build the island, which is completely different from step 2, expand the island, because we now need to actually build the island we're going to build our base on, which will be massive, have vertical terrain, and overall just be epic. So I used the door method to begin collecting up a bunch of gravel. The reason I'm collecting gravel is because we're going to use the coarse dirt method to farm up a bunch of dirt in order to construct the island. I did that for a while, traded some more, and then began farming dirt with the coarse dirt method. I did that for the rest of the day, and then began placing dirt into the island on the morning of day 35. But I guess I forgot that I was supposed to be building the frame of the actual island, so that's a moment. I then decided to free these villagers to begin populating the island, and I forced all of them to become farmers so I could trade wheat for emeralds, and so they'll automatically replant our wheat field. Then I purchased a shiny new diamond pickaxe, and then headed into the mines because we have no iron, and I want to make an anvil so I can upgrade our shovel, so we can build the island faster. I headed into the mine shaft, and almost immediately found a librarian zombie villager, so that's funny. I then found and promptly excavated a vein of iron, which was connected to a vein of gold, which was connected to a vein of diamonds. That's gotta be in my top 10 Minecraft 100 Days Deserted Island Day 35 mining moments. I then mined the other vein of diamonds I found, and then continued exploring the mine shaft on the morning of day 36, and managed to find lava. It was directly under a cave spider spawner though, so I just quickly ran in, grabbed the lava, and then ran out. I then headed back up to the surface and made a diamond axe and a diamond sword with our profits. And with that, we actually have full diamond armor and tools. Now we just need everything to be enchanted. I then committed arson and then dove into the depths to collect more gravel to actually begin work on building the island. I did that for a while and then got to work duplicating dirt for the rest of the day. I then proceeded to spend almost the entirety of day 37 duplicating duplicating dirt. And unfortunately for my sanity, this is just the beginning of the suffering I had to endure to construct this massive island. But anyways, after some more scamming, I mean business transactions at the end of the day, and dealing with more phantoms, I finally actually began work on constructing the outline for our island on the morning of day 38, and I ended up spending almost the entirety of the day doing that as well. And as you can already tell, I was planning on making this island absolutely massive. Then a thunderstorm started, and again, lightning can turn villagers into witches, and that would not exactly be good, so I immediately went to sleep. Then on the morning of day 39, I tried using a boat to speed up my dirt placing, but it didn't really work, so I went back to my swimming method, and continued placing in the outline, trying to give it a natural island-like shape along the way. I managed to complete it, but then realized that this corner was a bit too much of a corner, so I began trying to round it off. Once I was done with that, I ran around the outline, lighting it up with torches, but then I ran out. I was then attacked by another trident-wielding drowned, but managed to exterminate him, and our island outline was already becoming a mob farm, so I quickly grabbed some more torches and lit the rest of it up. We still need a Trial Chambers Explorer map to complete step 8 and accomplish our goal of collecting every 1.21 block an item, and we also need a librarian to get efficiency on our shovel so we can collect dirt faster and complete step 9. So I set out to find a shipwreck in order to get some paper for a cartography table. I wandered aimlessly through the infinite ocean for the rest of the day, and then managed to find a shipwreck on the morning of day 40 without changing my shader settings even a singular time to increase visibility. Anyways, I managed to get lucky, and the first chest I looted had a bunch of paper and a buried treasure map. So I headed back to the island, and then realized that the buried treasure map I found was bugged out and didn't have an X on it. This is the saddest moment of my entire life. Anyways, then I crafted a cartography table, and then some books and a bookshelf using the leather we got from the wandering trader llamas earlier, and then crafted a bookshelf, and finally a lectern. I then graciously freed these two inhabitants from their life of freedom and gifted them with employment. That basically took the rest of the day, but nonetheless, I began recycling the librarian's trades to get an efficiency book, and then realized I was broke again, so I began chopping down more trees on the morning of day 41. Wait, you mean to tell me you don't chop down your trees from the top down? Anyways, I did that for a while, then scammed our fletching villagers some more, and then realized that our librarian and cartographer had quit their jobs. Understandable, have a nice day. So I went back to chopping down trees, and also harvested our wheat field a bit more to trade for emeralds. The island then gained 5 new inhabitants from overseas, but they kept trying to return to their homeland, so I slept through the night, and on the morning of day 42, I just gave up on that and went back to trying and failing to get these villagers to lock onto their workstations. And one of the villagers escaped, so I had to go through the extremely annoying and painstaking process of getting him back into position again, but they still wouldn't enter the workforce, so after freeing some more villagers, I just placed and destroyed the lectern next to these villagers until I got the trade I wanted. Except I never got the trade I wanted, so I went back to the other villagers to see if it would work now, and it finally did for our cartographer. So I swapped the cartography table and lectern, and then the cartography villager entered the workforce as well. I then began breaking and replacing it over and over until either my brain imploded or I got an efficiency book trade. I did that for the rest of the day and continued doing that as Monkey D. Luffy brought the dawn of the world on the morning of day 43, and after deleting the last of my neurons, I managed to finally get an efficiency book, but it was only efficiency 1. So after calmly maintaining my composure and punching a hole through my monitor, I continued breaking and placing the lectern to get a better trade, and I actually got another efficiency trade pretty quickly, and this time it was efficiency 3. Still pretty bad, but good enough. So I went back home to grab my purse, and then went back to the trading hall to buy it, but I apparently also needed a book, so I crafted one with our remaining leather and paper, and then purchased the enchanted book. I then began smelting a bunch of iron armor using random wooden things I found lying around in our storage system for iron to make an anvil. That wasn't a very effective approach to collecting iron, however, so I dove into the ocean to collect some iron from around our island. I then crafted an anvil, and then began chopping down trees, traded sticks for emeralds, and then bought a new enchanted diamond shovel from a toolsmith, which I then also added the efficiency 3 book to. And now that we have an epic shovel, I dove back into the ocean to collect more gravel on the morning of day 44 so we can continue working on step 9. But I quickly noticed that I wasn't able to insta-mine gravel, even with efficiency 3 on my shovel. I was sure that you only needed efficiency 2 or 3 to insta-mine gravel, but apparently you need at least efficiency 4 to insta-mine gravel for some reason. So I used the last of our leather and almost the last of our paper to craft another book, and chopped down more trees, traded for more emeralds so I could purchase another efficiency book, and then spend more levels adding an efficiency book to our diamond shovel again. And then I tested out our new shovel to make sure it could insta-mine gravel, and it can, so I headed back into the ocean and began collecting a ton of gravel. And by the way, I'm able to mine with the same speed underwater because the enchanted diamond helmet trade we got from our armorer has aqua affinity on it. But anyways, I continued collecting gravel, fighting drown, and and also collecting any iron I found, and then swam around collecting the profits. I then saw that another wandering trader had spawned, and there was finally a sapling trade. So I quickly headed back over to the trading hall to get rich quick, but I still didn't have enough to buy 4 saplings, which is the minimum amount I would need to actually get a renewable source of dark oak wood, so I began chopping down more trees on the morning of day 45. Then the wandering trader llamas mysteriously disappeared again, and the wandering trader mysteriously got into this boat that suddenly materialized into existence for some reason. And then I traded more emeralds and bought some dark oak saplings and drip leaf for some reason, even though I didn't have enough dark oak saplings yet, and then went back to chopping down trees. But then this tree I bone mealed grew with a beehive on it. I forgot this was a thing, but beeswax is actually going to be essential for getting the waxed variants of all the new copper blocks, which are technically new blocks, so I'll come back to that beehive later. Anyways, I went back to chopping down trees at a new location, and then realized that bees had popped out of the beehive. So I bone mealed the ground to get some flowers so I could increase the bee population. But then I just gave up for some reason and went back to chopping down trees. Anyways, then I traded for more emeralds and then purchased the remaining sapling we needed. I also bought a brown mushroom, a coral block, and a pufferfish, cause why not, I guess. And then bone mealed our very first tree other than an oak tree, before immediately chopping the whole thing down to get more sapling. And then I bone mealed and chopped down another dark oak tree to get more sapling. Then this wandering trader mysteriously disappeared, and now we hopefully won't run out. So after planting another 4 of the saplings, I crafted all that dark oak wood into sticks and traded said sticks for more emeralds, and then used said emeralds to continue leveling up our cartography villager. And he only needed to be upgraded one more time to get the Trial Chambers Explorer map. So I chopped down some more trees and then collected a bunch of sand from under our island because our cartographer had a glass panes trade. Anyways, then I smelted the sand into glass, crafted some glass panes, and then finally leveled up our cartographer to journeyman level, and saw that there was a Trial Chambers Explorer map trade. Except I guess it's actually just called a Trial Explorer map. Lame. But I needed a compass, so I proceeded to smelt up random iron tools with a random assortment of wooden things again on the morning of day 46. And with my newly acquired iron, I crafted a compass and then finally purchased a Trial Explorer map. And upon opening it, it seems like the Trial Chambers is pretty close by, but we'll go explore that later. For now, we need to get to work on our other 2 main goals if we want to complete them by the end of the challenge. So I traded some more glass planes with the cartographer to get some more emeralds, and then crafted and placed a campfire underneath the beehive so we can safely collect honeycombs from it without all the bees attacking us once it's ready to be harvested. I then chopped down a tree, traded more glass panes for emeralds, and then finally began using the coarse dirt method to turn all the gravel we collected into dirt. Rain or shine, the block game grind don't stop. So I continued placing coarse dirt, tilling coarse dirt, and mining coarse dirt for the entire rest of the day, and for a significant percentage of day 47. I then dove into the ocean again to collect some more iron. After exploring this ocean cave and obtaining a decent quantity of iron, I headed back up to the surface, crafted a pair of shears, and collected honeycomb from the beehive. I then utilized said honeycomb to obtain the waxed variants of a few different copper blocks, and after deleting some more phantoms, I placed them in a chest to more easily keep track of what we have so far, since there's no visual difference between waxed and unwaxed copper blocks. I then crafted some more copper blocks and placed them down so we can get some more of the oxidized variants later on. Then on the morning of day 48, I finally began on step 9.5. Still just the outline, but this feels more like we're making progress. It's time to build the outline for the terrain of the island, and then fill it in. And because I'm pretty sure I built the 2D outline too big, I'm just going to start with this quarter of the outline, see how long that takes, and then decide if I have time to make the island this big, or if I need to downsize a bit. So after marking the edges of the quarter of the island I want to work on, I began constructing the outline for the terrain. I started by creating lines from the outer outline to the center, from the front, the side, and the middle. And then I began creating a series of lines connecting these lines at each level of vertical terrain. Once it was nighttime, I began lighting up the outline, but ran out of torches, so I chopped down this dark oak tree and began smelting the logs into charcoal to make more torches with, and then continued lighting up the outline. I then went back to placing in the outline, making sure to maintain the natural island-like shape for each layer of terrain as I went. I continued that process for the rest of the day, and then destroyed some of the center area and began rebuilding it lower on the morning of day 49. And I was already almost out of dirt, so I began filling in some of the outline until I was basically out of dirt. I then crafted some more doors and dove back into the ocean to continue collecting gravel. I did that for a while, then swam around collecting all the profits, and then got back to the extremely fun and engaging process of using the coarse dirt method to turn all that gravel into dirt. I continued losing IQ points for the rest of the day, and it's now day 50, and we're officially halfway through the challenge. We've definitely made a lot of progress, but I'm starting to realize just how ambitious my goals for this challenge really were. So we're going to have to pick up the pace if we want to accomplish all of our goals by the end of the challenge. So I continued farming dirt for like half of the day, and then went back to working on creating and filling in the outline for this quarter of the island, which I continued doing for the entire rest of the day. I then continued filling in the outline on day 51, and now that we don't really need this area anymore, we might as well reclaim all of this dirt to use for filling in the rest of the outline. So I began destroying our homeland to make way for the birth of a new nation under axolotl rule. Once I had ruthlessly decimated all the land underneath our new island and blocked off all this water that was now flowing into our mine area, I went back to placing in the outline for the island, and did that along with fighting off phantoms and lighting the whole thing up until I had basically ran out of dirt. I then began transferring our old farmland to our new island. I began by destroying all of our old crops, then creating water sources and tilling dirt on the new island, and then finally planting in all the wheat seeds. I also placed in a couple composters to create more job opportunities, so hopefully some villagers will decide to relocate to the new island. I then went to sleep right as the moon was setting, so I don't lose valuable time, but still stop phantoms from spawning for a few days. I then began moving all of our chests and workstations upstairs, and then I repaired my diamond shovel, which was on the brink of implosion. Once I was done moving out of our old apartment, I apparently actually still had a bunch of dirt left, so I went back to filling in the frame of the island, did that until I actually ran out of dirt, and then continued demolition of our previous residence for more dirt. I boated around in a boat to collect the profits, and then continued destroying the old island for the rest of the day. And on the morning of day 53, then this villager died, lol. I then freed an absurd amount of villagers to restabilize the island's population, and I decided to just permanently destroy these walls and block off this water channel so the villagers can just immediately become productive members of society upon being born. And I've officially realized that my original island outline was way too ambitious. The island is still gonna be massive, just not as massive as the entire observable universe, unfortunately. So I got to work creating the new outline for the island with the dirt we collected, but I was rudely interrupted by another trident-wielding drown, and after failing to get a big fork again, my shield was completely obliterated. So I made a new one and then went back to work on the outline of the island, before lighting the whole thing up with torches. I then got to work destroying the old outline, and then boated around in a boat to collect the profits. I then fought another trident drowned and didn't get a trident, and then began lighting up more of the island on the morning of day 54. And while our island may look a little bit completely atrocious as it is now, in just a short amount of time, this island will be teeming with life, buildings, capitalism, spaceships, constant explosions, and even the entire Milky Way galaxy. Okay, maybe that was a little bit of an exaggeration, but the point is, it's gonna be epic. So I began constructing the outline for the remaining 3/4 of the island, starting with this cliff area, which will eventually house an epic windmill mansion. I built up to the height I wanted, then built out a natural looking oval thing, and then began connecting the outer outline to the upper outline. I continued placing in and then filling in the outline for basically the rest of the day, and then removed these water trees for violating the laws of physics. I then created an escape route for these trapped villagers on the morning of day 55, then freed these other villagers, and then bred our bees and planted flowers around the beehive so they'll continue to produce honeycombs for us. I then used the honeycombs we got earlier to make an artificial beehive so the bee colony can continue to expand. I then used 2 leads and a fence post to trap these 2 bees forever, which apparently prevents them from going back into the beehives, but that consequently means they also can't produce profits like this, so I let them go out of the goodness of my wallet. The goodness of my heart. It's now time for step 10. Build the buildings on the island. And I want to start with building an actual building around the villager trading hall. I'm not gonna build it right now, but I want to figure out the block palette I'm gonna use. So I placed down a block palette I think will look good and match the jungly theme I'm going for the island. I then found Disgusting Creature and brought him upstairs. I tried adding in some orange concrete to the block palette to see if it would work, but it didn't really look good, so I think this is the block palette I want to go with when we build it. So on the morning of day 56, I dove back into the ocean to collect up a bunch more gravel to get back to work on building the island. So I collected up a bunch of gravel and then began turning said gravel into dirt. I did that for the entire rest of the day and then did that for the entirety of day 57 and for the morning of day 58. I then purchased another shovel to repair my shovel and then began investing my profits into the construction of the island. And I also constructed this wall above the villager breeder so more villagers don't wander in. I continued building the island for the rest of the day and continued building the island on the morning of day 59. And I broke down this wall in favor of just covering the whole thing up. I then planted a bunch of trees around the island, bought some new axes, continued building the island, and then chopped down a bunch of trees. I then expanded the villager creation facility output channel up to the main floor so we can more efficiently increase our island population and become established as a nation. I then defended this herd of villagers from a trident drown and once again received 0 tridents. I mean, I know I don't have looting, but I still feel like I should have gotten one by now. Anyways, on day 60, continuing the efforts of increasing our population, I began attempting, keyword being attempting, to get these villagers to migrate to the surface. and managed to mostly succeed, but some souls were beyond saving, unfortunately. Bro. I then went under the island to continue collecting more dirt from the previous island and unused parts of the outline, and then got back to work placing dirt into the island using the collected building materials. I continued that process for a while, then lit up the island some more, and then saved another soul from the underworld. Even though the island isn't fully completed yet, it's starting to look something like an actual island, which is cool. Anyways, then I bone milled the area around the beehives to add some more flowers to the area, and I now actually want to get to work on step 10 and build the villager trading hall. And in order to do that, we need to collect a bunch of resources. We're also going to need building materials for all the other buildings I want to build, so we need to commence a resource collection arc. I began by collecting dark oak wood for a while, and then put a campfire under our artificial beehive so we can safely harvest honeycombs from it. I then fed our flowers some bees on the morning of day 61, and then harvested more honeycomb, which I used to make more beehives. I then used 2 leaves to trap 2 bees to a fence post again, because I was scared they might just fly away and never come back, and then returned to a life as a humble lumberjack, hacking at this solid cube of tree to collect more wood. Then another wandering trader spawned, and all he really had was vines, but that's useful to us as foliage for our buildings. So I used some of the wood I just collected to trade sticks for emeralds, and then bought some vines. And then the wandering trader and the llamas magically disappeared again. That's so weird. Why does that keep happening? Anyways, I went back to collecting wood, and once I was done with that, I set up a rudimentary vine farm. And for some reason, you can't bone mill vines, so we just have to wait until this grows to collect more. Anyways, then I collected some leaves with our shears, because once the trading hall is complete, I want to add leaves to the walls and roof to look like giant vines are growing on it, so it looks more natural and like the building is one with nature and the island or something. But anyways, I then finally got to work on the actual building, and started by deciding the size of the building by marking where the dark oak pillars will go. Once I felt like the pillar placement looked right, I built the pillars up, and as annoying as it is, we're going to have to move these villagers up at some point. Well, I guess we don't have to, but we're going to, so yeah. I noticed that the villager creation facility should probably have produced more villagers by now, and I had a hunch that it was because there's 4 villagers in there now instead of 2, because 2 more wandered in here somehow. And since there's only 4 beds, the villagers won't make more villagers, because there needs to be more beds than there are villagers in this area, I think. Luckily though, these villagers spontaneously burst into flames out of absolutely nowhere and for no reason. That's crazy. Anyways, that should fix the problem though. Now I need to hit the mines to collect up a bunch of deep slate for the trading hall building, but there seemed to be a mob infestation in our mine entrance. I think all the torches got knocked out when water flowed into this area earlier, so I exterminated the problem and then began relighting up the mines. It took a while because of the water I placed down when fighting the creeper, but once I got down to deep slate level, I began collecting a bunch of deep slate. I hacked at deep slate for a while and then headed back up to the surface once I felt like I had enough, and it still felt like we weren't getting any new inhabitants, so I blocked off this water chute so I'll be able to see if villagers are actually getting up here. Anyways, then I finally got back to work on the trading hall, and started by constructing an outline for the roof with copper, but I almost immediately gave up because I heard a wandering trader. I commenced a search and pretty quickly found this invisible wandering trader hiding under the island, and we had finally gotten a jungle sapling trade, which is the main thing I wanted from wandering traders, so I immediately commenced Operation Get My Bread Up, and began trading sticks for emeralds, and then purchased 3 saplings. But I still wanted at least 1 more, so I traded more sticks for emeralds, and bought the 4th sapling. I also bought a slime ball for some reason, and then immediately planted and bone milled one of the jungle saplings and destroyed all the leaves to get more saplings. But I didn't even get a single sapling from this tree, so I decided I needed to buy a bunch more jungle saplings so there's no chance that I ever run out. So I continued trading sticks for emeralds, bought a sea pickle for some reason, and then bought the entire stock of jungle saplings. I also bought brown dye for some reason, and then got to work trying to get more saplings by bone milling and chopping down jungle trees and destroying all of the leaves. I also actually wanted to use jungle planks for the roof of the trading hall anyways, so this is also just to collect a bunch of jungle wood. I continued doing that, but I would only ever profit 0 or 1 sapling each time, so I decided to go ahead and bone mill a giant jungle tree to see if I get more, and it still wasn't a lot, but I did seem to be profiting 1 or 2 as opposed to none at the very least. So I continued chopping down jungle trees for basically the rest of the day, and then the wandering trader and the llamas magically disappeared again. Wow, this is so mysterious. Then I expanded the bee colony and harvested more honeycombs, and then finally got back to work on the trading hall building. I built out the rest of the copper outline for this side of the roof, and then placed in some jungle planks and oak planks to try to see which one looks better. I also used some of the wax we got from the beehives to wax some of the copper stairs so they won't all oxidize. I then began adding in some oak stairs occasionally to create some texture and variation, and then got attacked by phantoms. I then stripped the dark oak log pillars, and then began adding in the oak log pillars to mark where the new trading booths will go. I also added in some jungle planks occasionally for some texture and variation, and then stripped all of the pillars so it actually looks good, and then added more deep slate to the ground and front of the villager booths on the morning of day 65. And it looks good so far, but this side doesn't really have enough depth. So I began adding in a protruding segment of the building in the middle of this side of the building. I built up the dark oak pillars, added in a deep slate roof, stripped all the dark oak pillars, and then took a break to add a chimney to the building. I realized I could buy bricks from this mason villager, so I invested my life savings into the masonry industry, and then began adding a brick chimney to the trading hall. It's just a 2x2 brick pillar, but I also added in some deep slate to the top and these campfires surrounded by trapdoors, so it looks like an actual chimney with smoke coming out. I also added in some vines and leaves to begin making the building look like it's being overtaken by nature. Then I added these jungle pillars to the protruding building, and then got to work on building the other side of the roof. Then I continued this deep slate foundation on the other side of the building, and then destroyed these unused oak pillars for more wood. I then freed this villager from the water chute, and this means that the villager breeder is working and the island population is slowly but surely increasing. I continued work on the trading hall on the morning of day 66, and then almost met my demise drowning whilst fighting a drown. But anyways, I continued adding in the deep slate foundation and flooring to the other side of the building, and then added in the oak pillars, and then decided that having a deep slate outline for the roof but only on the sides would look better. So I began replacing the copper outlines on the sides with deep slate, along with completing the copper outline on the other side of the trading hall. I then began adding more giant vines onto the roof with leaves, fought some more phantoms, properly connected this protruding section to the main building, and then crafted some chains and lanterns on the morning of day 67 and added them to the trading hall. I then continued working on the protruding building thing and managed to get it looking pretty much how I wanted. I then began relocating the villagers' workstations and using the power of water to give them all a raise. I guess you could say their living situation has been elevated. I mean, it's not exactly groundbreaking or anything, but it's a step up. Okay, I'll stop. Anyways, I continued doing that for the rest of the day, along with fighting off more phantoms, of course, and then expanded our bee colony on the morning of day 68, before returning to relocating our villagers to the second floor, and managed to successfully uplift all of our villagers. And then I discovered some villagers under the trading hall and freed them. Just kidding, I just left them there. I then built empty offices for the potential future residents, and then got to work on completing the sides of the trading hall. I added in the deep slate roof outline for the right side, fought more phantoms, and then began constructing an entrance on the right side of the trading hall. I added some jungle pillars, this deep slate arch, a jungle planks wall, and a door. I then began destroying all these unnecessary blocks inside the trading hall so it looks less atrocious and a bit more spacious. And it's finally the most important day of the challenge. Epic. I then realized that there should probably be a floor in here, so I added in a floor. And I thought it would be cool if we could trade from the villagers from the inside or the outside of the building, so I added in this oak log counter thing so the villagers can't escape, and then broke more of the walls. Then I added this second horizontal line of oak logs to the top to make it look better, then began adding in the same design to the other side of the hull, but then removed the upper oak logs and replaced them with dark oak logs to introduce some more contrast. Then I added stairs to the roof to make it look cleaner, and then continued adding the same design to the other side of the hull. I then added some jungle plank slabs to the top of the ceiling, then replaced some of the oak logs with jungle logs for some texture and variation, and with that, the interior is basically complete. So I got back to work on the right side of the trading hall, which I built basically the same as the left side, but with this window thing instead of a deep slate arch. Then I harvested our extremely sophisticated and complex vine farm, and then got to work building another, smaller protruding section of the trading hall on this side of the roof, whilst being rudely interrupted by more phantoms multiple times. And since the moon was setting, I just slept real quick so phantoms will stop spawning for a while. I then harvested the beehives on the morning of day 70, and then got back to work on the trading hall, and with that, all that's left is some finishing details. So I went around the building, placing in a ton of vines and leaves. I then needed to get these chests out of the way to continue the deep slate flooring surrounding the building. So I began attempting to do that, and then another lightning storm started, and lightning literally struck right in front of me. So I went to sleep, and on the morning of day 71, I added the rest of the trapdoors to the chimney, and then heard wandering trader noises again. Once I located the trader, I made the enlightening discovery that this humble traveler's trades were complete garbage and not worth my time. So I got back to moving these chests upstairs, filled in some of the area behind the trading hall with dirt, and then traded some more sticks for emerald, and purchased some items from the wandering trader, cause why not, I guess. Anyways, then the wandering trader and the llamas mysteriously disappeared again, and with that, we've actually fully completed the trading hall. Then I destroyed this floating mass of leaves, and then crafted a honeycomb block. Epic. Then I combined these 2 protection 1 diamond leggings I bought when I was leveling up our armor earlier to get protection 2 diamond leggings, but then just put them in this chest for some reason. And now it's time for step 9.75. Destroy the island. Okay, not really. Basically, after taking a look in replay mod, I decided that the current island shape is kind of off from what I originally envisioned. So I want to shave back the front of the island a little and extend the side of the island a little bit. And I began this process by carving and then building out a line marking where the new island should end. But it looked kind of goofy, so I began carving and building a new line for the new island. I did that for the rest of the day and continued doing that on the morning of day 72. I took a look in replay mod again and then tweaked the shaping again, destroying the section of the island I wanted to remove, continued building the new outline, time, took a look in replay mod again, tweaked the shape of the new island again, and then continued that process until I was happy with the shape. Once I began creating an outline for the terrain and removing the old island. I did that for the rest of the day and continued doing that on the morning of day 73, and then began filling in the new outline. Then I got distracted pursuing a life as a potato farmer, and then got back to work destroying the old island and filling in the new island outline, which I did until I ran out of dirt. I then dove into the ocean and collected a ton of gravel. I then boated around in a boat to collect said gravel, and then used some honeycomb to wax some of these copper stairs. Then on the morning of day 74, I began using the coarse dirt method to turn all the gravel I collected into dirt, and I spent basically the entire rest of the day doing that before getting back to placing dirt into the island by the end of the day. I continued placing dirt into the island frame on the morning of day 75, and we're now officially 3/4 of the way through this challenge. Then I absolutely pranked this stupid villager by trapping him in this hole forever. I mean, it's his fault for falling for it. Please laugh. Anyways, I kept losing brain cells placing in dirt, and then began on the next geographical feature of the island. I want to add in a waterfall leading to a river flowing right through the island, because I haven't done that before. But seriously, a river just adds a lot to this kind of base. So I began digging out a rough outline of the shape. This will also nicely split the village we build later on into multiple parts. I continued fixing up the shape and collecting dirt that fell into the ocean, and then began adding an artificial bed to the river. I continued doing that, assaulted some wet men, and I tried to make it relatively shallow so it feels like a river. I also got attacked by more phantoms, and then began placing water into the river on the morning of day 76. I didn't really finish the riverbed though, cause I'm too broke. Once I was about 70% done with that, I moved on to destroying the old wheat field because I'm physically incapable of finishing projects that I start. I began outlining where the new wheat field will go. I want it to sit diagonally to the river like this. I then began tilling the dirt and placing in water sources to hydrate the farmland. I then found this secret villager hangout under the island. This is insubordination and I will not accept it. Honestly, I'm only about 80% confident what insubordination means though, so I'll let this slide just this once. Okay, are you serious? Anyways, I went back to tilling the artificial land and then began placing in the seeds. I continued doing that as dawn broke on day 77 and then watched as the sun burnt my enemies. I continued placing in seeds until I got carpal tunnel and then placed in a bunch of composters over the water sources. Both so our idiot villagers don't get stuck in the water somehow, but also so they'll become farmers so they won't get stuck in the river somehow. Speaking of that, I tried and failed to retrieve my toolsmith villager from the depths of this ocean. I mean, it's a river, but that's clearly an ocean to villagers. Those 2 blocks you need to swim are just completely insurmountable. I get it, bro. Anyways, we still have some work to do on our goal of getting 100 villagers. Basically, we just need more beds so the villagers on our island will continue to produce more product. But getting 100 beds through string from our mob farm would take too long. I thought about trying to get sheep by leaving and coming back to the island over and over, but apparently that would take a few attempts most likely. So we need another strategy. Even if that estimate isn't accurate though, apparently there's such a thing as a shepherd villager, and they literally trade wool and beds. So we're gonna do that. You learn something new about Minecraft every day, I guess, even when it's literally your job. So I crafted a loom using some string we got from the mob farm earlier, and after trying to get a shepherd villager in a boat, I eventually managed to succeed. And this is actually the only first tier trade that is worth anything to us, because it's the only one that has an option other than trading wool, which we don't have any easy way of getting. So after realizing we were completely broke still, I traded with a local farmer and then used the profit to lock in the shepherd's trade. I was still broke though, so I began bridging out from the island to farm some jungle trees before being rudely interrupted by more phantoms and drowned again. But then I realized I was broke again. So that's like 3 times today I was reminded of that. So that's fun. But yeah, I didn't have any bone meal, so I headed up to the mob farm to get some more bones. I smacked mobs for the rest of the day, and then finally achieved the freediving world record, at the cost of breaking all the bones in my body, of course. Then on the precipice of day 78, don't look up the definition of that word, I definitely used it correctly in that sentence, I heard a strange noise coming from the basement. Well, other than the sound of our prisoners' cries for help, of course. It was a zombie villager. These guys are next too. Natural selection, I guess. It's their fault for being so stupid. Anyways, I bone milled a giant jungle tree and got to work mining the whole thing down. Then I scammed our local fletching villagers again and used the profit to begin leveling up our shepherd villager. It wasn't enough to get the bed trades though, so I demolished another jungle tree and then returned to a life of crime, scamming fletching villagers for more emeralds before returning to leveling up our shepherd, only to realize that he didn't have a bed trade, which should appear once he's a journeyman. So I forced a different villager to work a job he hates in order to benefit me, and began leveling him up. I then used the wool I got from leveling him up to make some beds. I then repeated the same process, demolishing jungle trees and scamming fletchers so I could buy a poop ton of beds and place them down, and continued that process for the rest of the day and on the morning of day 79, and managed to place down a slightly absurd amount of beds. I then cured the zombie villager, yeah, I definitely cured him, and then attempted to save these 2 poor souls from their own stupidity, but it was too hard so I gave up. I then began attempting to save these other villagers from their brainlessness, and it kinda worked, but I also gave up.
So yeah.
I then made a new diamond pickaxe as a backup and headed back into the mines to try and mine for dirt, because I don't think I can physically or mentally or emotionally handle farming dirt with the coarse dirt method for a singular additional second. So I began mining and pretty quickly ran into this massive vein of dirt that I mined out for the rest of the day. And on the morning of day 80, yeah, maybe I should have just been doing this from the start, honestly. Anyways, I headed back to my home country with an immense quantity of dirt wealth and began work on changing the shape of this cliff thing a bit. I mostly just wanted to extend it more to this side of the island. I then quit my life as a landscaper to become a lumberjack for the rest of the day, and then built a prison around our villagers while they slept. Then this large man spawned on the island, and I felt slightly intimidated, so I did the only reasonable thing and immediately exterminated him. No, but seriously, iron golems can end this hardcore world in like one hit, and all we have to do to anger them is left click a villager on accident. So this is the easiest way to deal with that problem. Or so I thought, but another iron golem basically immediately spawned, so this time I attempted to get him into a boat, but apparently that doesn't work on iron golems. So I just built a dirt box around him. Sorry, bro. I then began filling in the top of the cliff with dirt, and I managed to get most of it done before running out of dirt again. Bro. Anyways, then I moved all of the villagers' beds out of their prison to make way for their food supply. Then I hit the mines again to collect a ton of cobblestone to smelt into stone for the rest of the cliff thing. I did that for the rest of day 81 and then began smelting it all on the morning of day 82. Then I went back to mining for copper and more dirt, and I managed to find some and head back up to the surface. I then finally completed the top of the cliff thing, so we can get to work on the windmill thing I want to build here. I then gathered our stone profits and then got attacked by this wet fork man as I lit up our tree farm thing. But I sadly did not acquire a trident. I acquired more resources for the windmill mansion, but we were out of deep slate, so I headed into the mines again and began mining out a giant room at deep slate level. On the morning of day 83, I did that for like half of the day and managed to get a pretty decent amount of deep slate. I returned to our incomplete cliff and unloaded the profits we obtained underground. I then increased the security of our villager prison and then dove into the depths to mine up some copper from around our island. I swam around collecting a bunch of copper for the rest of the day, and on the morning of day 84, then finally got back to work chopping down jungle trees. I then bamboozled some more Fletchers so I could get some more tools, but mostly so I could get more beds. But the shepherd was even more broke than I was somehow, so I got him a new workstation to get his bread up. I then harvested a variety of trees and leaves for building materials for the rest of the day, and I slept at the end of the day to hopefully get rid of phantom spawns. On the morning of day 85, I pulverized more trees into cubic meters of sawdust. I began by materializing the outline whilst tweaking the size and shaping along the way. I'm starting with the house part of this half windmill, half residential building. So I built up some dark oak pillars, stripped the logs, and then began deliberating on the size and placement of the windmill's base. And my deliberation had concluded, so I began building up the windmill's base with stone. I then took a look in replay mod, and then began work on adding in a dark oak border to introduce some contrast to the build. I then decided on the placement of the pillars for the actual windmill building, and then began extending said pillars skywards, and then began placing in the walls and adding in more pillars with jungle wood and jungle logs on the morning of day 86. I then assembled some dark oak fences, and then went scuba diving to collect more aggregate, which I then used along with some white dye I crafted with bone meal to craft some concrete powder. I then turned said concrete into concrete using the power of hydration and excavation. I then began on actually adding the actual windmill sails, starting with adding in the wooden frames of the sails with dark oak fences. After deliberating on the sizing and shaping of the wooden outlines, I decided on a shape I liked and replicated it for the other three directions. I then began placing in the actual sails with concrete. How would this windmill function with literal cubic meters of concrete instead of cloth attached to the sails? Stop asking questions. Anyways, I matched the shape of the wooden frame and made sure to layer it to give the sail a 3D effect, so it looks like there's actually wind blowing into them. I then began adding in some trapdoors and stairs along the wooden frame to make it look better. Then on the morning of day 87, another iron golem spawned, and my masculinity once again felt threatened, so I trapped him in a box forever. Keep your friends close and your enemies in a cobblestone box and leave them to starve, right? I then began collecting dark oak wood so I could continue working on the windmill, and then decided to trap my shepherd villagers in a cobblestone box as well to decrease morale. I released the villager that didn't trade beds, but then the other villager escaped to follow his dreams or something. But unless this villager's dream is to trade me an infinite number of beds forever, they're never coming true, so I trapped him again. I then got back to work adding in the sails and the details to the sails with trapdoors and stairs. And I did a few too many water bucket clutches along the way. It's literally day 87, what is wrong with me? I continued working on that for a while, and also this is mildly absolutely terrifying to do at night because if a phantom spawns right now and knocks me off here, the last 87 days might have been for nothing. Anyways, I then realized that I had built one of the sail frames wrong, so I broke it down and rebuilt it. I continued working on the windmill sails, then bought an absurd quantity of beds from our shepherd and placed them down, and then escorted this trespasser off of my property on the morning of day 88, and then continued adding in details to the windmill sails and managed to basically complete it. And it looks pretty good, I think. I might want to make it a bit bigger at some point, but we'll see. So I began constructing the walls for the house with jungle wood, but I pretty quickly ran out of construction materials, so I chopped down another jungle tree and then got back to work placing in the walls. Once I was done with that, I began adding in the roof, starting with a deep slate and copper border, and then filling in the frame with jungle wood. I did that for the rest of the day and managed to complete the roof by the end of the day. Then on the morning of day 89, I began trying to add a window to the front of the house for some detail. I eventually landed on something I was happy with and then replaced the floor of the house with dark oak slabs and added in some copper doors. Then a thunderstorm started and I got scared, so I went to sleep. But seriously, why have so many thunderstorms started during this challenge? Anyways, on the morning of day 90, we only had 10 days left in this challenge. So after breaking my ankles, I added in the walls to the windmill building with jungle planks. I then stripped the dark oak log pillars of the windmill building and finished putting in the dark oak floor around the windmill building. I then built up a roof for the windmill with deep slate and then extended the front wall up to connect to the roof, and then added an entrance and a floor to the inside of the building. And with that, we're almost fully done with the windmill part of this building. So I began trying to add more detail to the front of the house part, and I just settled on this dark oak support beam, which I had to use dark oak planks instead of logs for part of because I'm broke. Anyways, then I finally began on actually connecting these two buildings, starting with building this connecting roof. I worked on that for the rest of the day and continued working on that and completed it on the morning of day 91. I didn't have enough materials to build the walls though, so I committed a healthy dose of deforestation and then built the walls. And it's time to fully complete step 9 by building the rest of the cliff. And then maybe one day we'll fill in the back of the island too, but who knows. But anyways, I began placing dirt into the island along the cliff side, starting at the top, bottom, and sides, and moving downwards, upwards, eastwards, westwards, skywards, and onwards. I also began destroying the parts of the island that were going to be covered up to collect more dirt. Fought another drowned and didn't get a trident, and continued filling in the cliffside, transitioning to using stone, andesite, and gravel as I got to the section above the river, which is where I want to put in a waterfall. I managed to mostly complete the cliffside by the end of the day, and then began filling in the bottom of the river with the rest of the dirt I had on the morning of day 92. I then fully completed filling in the cliffside, and then began adding in a pond that will lead to the river in front of the windmill house. I started by breaking out a pond shape leading to where I wanted the waterfall to begin, and then added in the floor of the pond with dirt, added in some more stone to the cliffside at the beginning of the waterfall, and then began adding in the water. Some of the water seemed unwilling to obey the laws of physics, so I began correcting its existence. And with that, we're basically done with the waterfall, and also basically done with this entire cliff area. So it's now finally time for step 10.75, the rest of the base. And we only have like 5 days to do this because we still need to explore trial chambers to collect the rest of the 1.21 blocks and items, which I'm having doubts is even possible at this point, but basically we need to speedrun this. So I began collecting building materials from around our base, then chopped down this jungle tree, and then put some of the building materials in this chest. And I want to start by adding a couple of docks to the island, both because I think it'll look cool and because they're insanely easy to build and will help to make our island look more prosperous than it actually is. So I built out this 3-block wide H shape supported by jungle logs with jungle planks, before deciding I didn't like it and beginning to destruct some of it. I then sniped this trespasser and then completed the dock on the morning of day 93. I then planted some saplings because we're gonna need a lot more wood to build the rest of the base. I then placed a 2x2 jungle tree, which will also hopefully make the island look a lot cooler, but I'm just placing the saplings because I'm out of bone meal. I also wasted some time terraforming this area behind the villager trading hall some more, placed in another 2x2 jungle tree, chopped down another giant jungle tree, chopped down a dark oak tree, and then the giant jungle tree I had placed had already grown, which is cool. I then began work on the first actual house for our island's residents. I began by placing in some dark oak pillars and jungle pillars, added in some jungle plank walls, and I can't afford glass, so the windows are essentially just going to be missing parts of the wall. Anyways, I then added in a deep slate roof and used some stairs and slabs to make the windows and ceiling of the house look marginally better. I then added in a dark oak door and then began pathing in a path that goes all the way through our base. Then on the morning of day 94, I absolutely materialized the bridge going over the river, properly connecting the two major halves of our base. I then continued the path some, but this iron golem was in the way, so I politely escorted him and his friend off the island. I lost the footage though, but that's definitely what happened. I then demolished their unoccupied prisons to make way for the industrial expansion of our island civilization. I also destroyed our villager prison to make way for more residential neighborhoods, apartment complexes, and shopping centers. I then began trying to remind all of these villagers that they aren't fish, but that's apparently more difficult than you'd think, so I did that until nightfall and still wasn't able to get all of the villagers out of the river. Bruh. Anyways, I went back to pathing in the path around the trading hall and river, river, and then constructed the second dock for the island, again with jungle planks, and connected it up to the rest of the path. I also placed down a few individual jungle saplings. I then destroyed and relocated all of the villagers' beds to make way for everything I want to build in this area. And I then began constructing the next house for the island, starting with jungle logs for the pillars, jungle wood for the walls, and then began on the outline of the roof with copper. I continued the outline of the roof on the morning of day 95, and then added in the floor and the entrance. I then had just enough copper to cheap out and use jungle planks to complete the roof. I then filled in the roof with jungle stairs, and then added in some windows to this humble abode. I then extended the path out to our new encampment. That word barely works in that sentence, so do me a favor and don't look that up ever even a single time for the rest of time. I then quickly chopped down a jungle tree, destroyed our extremely sophisticated vine farm, and then began deciding where the next habitation will reside. I decided it should go right here, so I began making room for our new real estate endeavor. I then began speedrunning the fastest time to build the same house I just built, world record, except this time I'm using deep slate for the roof. Definitely not because I ran out of copper and I don't have time to get more. Nope, it's just my artistic intuition or something. I don't know. Anyways, I completed the house in record time and then moved on to building a villager trading booth stand thing I want to add across from the trading hall. I started with this stairs and slabs table thing, and then added this roof supported by these fence posts, and then added these trapdoors for detail or something as dawn broke on day 96, and it looks passable. I then began work on a little well thing by the windmill house. I started by deciding on the size and placement, then built a foundation, and then added on a roof supported by these stone walls. That looks like a well, I'd say. I then began pathing in a path leading from the rest of the village to the top of the cliff. I mean, it's pretty steep, but whatever. I then planted some more jungle saplings around the island to hopefully fill the whole thing in a bit more, and then chopped down another giant jungle tree and another dark oak tree. It was then time for one last building, but before I could get started, one of my citizens was making noise and I couldn't concentrate. But luckily, nature took care of him for me. Anyways, I wanted to add a little tiki bar thing here, but I'm too lazy to make campfires for it, so I'm just gonna make it out of dark oak. And I completed that on the morning of day 97. But I actually lied because there's one more building I want to build, a watchtower. So I got to work on building it up with jungle logs and planks, but with a stone brick foundation. Once I reached the top, I added in a dark oak roof to the thing. And with that, the island is almost complete. This store doesn't actually go anywhere, by the way. To add some more detail and make the island feel like its inhabitants regularly come and go from the island, I added a bunch of boats attached to fences via leads to each of the docks. And I think it looks pretty cool. And with that, we're gonna call the island completed, at least for now, because we're finally gonna head to a trial chambers to hopefully get the rest of the blocks and items we need. Honestly, I'm not too sure if that's exactly possible, but I'll try. So I prepared my inventory and then set out for our first major expedition from the island. Once I arrived on location, I dove into the depths and then ventured underground. I then began excavating a tunnel down to the trial chambers below, and once I saw tough bricks, I began searching for a good entrance point, and finally entered the trial chambers on the morning of day 98. All was pretty quiet upon my entrance to the facility. Anyways, I got some of the spawners to activate and began shooting the mobs from my hidey hole. I mean, if you think I'm risking this hardcore world on day 97 with my non-existent level of skill, you're mistaken. Also, breezes look absolutely insane with these shaders on. Anyways, breezes are pretty harmless, so I jumped into action to take them out up close. And I managed to get a trial key from the skeleton spawner, so I used it to unlock a vault, and we got the new disc and a wind charge. So not bad, I guess. But I trekked onwards into the rest of the trial chamber. I tried carefully making my way to and through this main hallway to gather up some loot, but I didn't really manage to find anything new. I did find this zombie spawner though, so that's cool. And after a bit of fruitless exploration, I decided to head back to where I entered. I gathered up some oxidized lamps, cause we're too broke to craft those on our own, and we can get all the different variants as long as we have the fully oxidized ones. But then I headed back into my mine to a different entrance of the trial chambers. And I'm not gonna lie, I just used replay mod to find another good place to enter. Sorry, but I don't really want to risk anything this late into the challenge. So I began mining over and down to the coordinates. After cautiously making my way over to the skeleton spawner, I began taking out the skeletons. And after a long and dangerous battle, okay, it wasn't really that difficult, on the morning of day 99, after defeating the trial spawner, I got another trial key, and then defeated some more breezes and got another trial key. I then unlocked another vault. Okay, I guess you need ominous keys to unlock those, which we need a bad omen potion for. But I literally couldn't find another vault in this room, so I just headed back to where we were earlier and unlocked a couple of vaults there, but I didn't really get anything cool. So I decided to go back to adventuring through the rest of the trial chambers, and managed to find this chest with a bad omen potion. And then on the morning of day 100, I accidentally activated this poisonous spider spawner and immediately and justifiably panicked. But I managed to successfully cower in fear, and oh yeah, it's day 100. Cool. Unfortunately, we no longer have time to get the rest of the blocks and items. So yeah, maybe I was being a bit too ambitious with that goal. But we can still get some more of the copper blocks with the copper bulb we got. So after checking where I was in replay mod, I began mining to the ocean. Once I reached the ocean, I swam up to the surface and absolutely maneuvered my way back to the island, which by the way, looks pretty epic, I think. Even though we kinda had to rush last minute like we were cramming for a test or something, so there aren't as many details as I'd normally like. I then went beneath the island to collect the 1.21 blocks and items from earlier, and moved them to the surface. I then realized that I've made a fatal mistake. I literally can't believe I made the exact same mistake I made in the cave only video. But I forgot to get the fully oxidized versions of all the copper blocks from the trial chambers so I can get all the different variants. Yeah, I could go back to the trial chambers to get them, but honestly, I don't really want to. So I just placed all the copper blocks down in hope that somehow they'll all oxidize in the next half a day. That's not gonna happen, but at least I tried. Anyways, I got all the random variants of the copper bulb that I could, and then on day 101, I got some more random copper block variants, did some epic parkour using the wind charges we got, bone milled the island a bunch with the bones we got, broke all the villagers' beds, added some more finishing touches to the island, and then broke out all the copper blocks. Sorry, I think when I was recording, I thought this was day 100. So, my bad. Unfortunately, we didn't really fully accomplish most of our goals, but you know what? I don't even care. I'm still happy with the amount of stuff we were able to accomplish in these 100 days with nothing but a tiny island in the middle of an infinite ocean. And I had fun making this video, so I hope you had fun watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more content like this, I'm trying to hit 1 million subscribers, so please consider subscribing. And if you want to try this challenge out for yourself, I'll leave a link to the data pack I used in the description below. I'll also leave a link to the data pack creator's YouTube channel as well. Patrons also get access to the world downloads for all of my 100 days videos, including this one, get shoutouts at the end of each of my videos, and it just helps me bring higher quality content to you more frequently. So consider becoming a patron. A huge shout out to our Diamond and Netherite patrons. But yeah, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.